I asked for makeup suggestions beyond just sad clown, and Ziz suggested it would be totally counterproductive, but possibly a blindfold? Two on the nose? Yeah, let's do it. It's just right there. We didn't even have to go that far. Okay. Okay. Nitpicking here, it's like dusting something off after a building has been completely demolished, you know, and just saying like, oh, this pen has a little dust on it. It's pointless. The whole thing's ruined. You know, why are you sitting here focusing on the minutia? Come on, Ms. Lemon, get it together.
What if this isn't exactly true? Where would that even leave me and you? If religion poisons everything, where is the antidote? Come drink the lemonade with me, erase all that they wrote. Why would God create us evil and wrong and punish us from afar? They tell us we're broken to sell us secure, we're worthy as we are.
Welcome, cult members, loyal subscribers, and casual viewers alike. Today we're going to jump into the sixth part of this awful book that I really wish I was blinded from seeing. My vocabulary is slowly disappearing because of how bad this book is. So let's go ahead and just get into some of your guys' previous comments. That way we can at least feel a little good, little nice before we get started on this terrible book. Chapman writes, if we were closer to the sun, we would fry. Dude, Hank's summers are when the Earth is at its most distant from the sun. Distance from the sun isn't as fragile as he believes. Earth's distance varies by millions of kilometers every year. But it's a very precise millions, because God. Michael Summers gives us the classic, I love it when creationists extol the perfection of the human eye while wearing glasses. Can't argue with that. Stephen Myers writes, wow, Hank, are you saying if things happened differently, things would be different? Mic drop. Such profundity is sure to convince every evolutionist of your existence of your God. Looks like I forgot to heart this one. My bad. There you go, Stephen. That is the opposite of what they're saying. That's the problem. They don't understand that this is something that exists because of the conditions. They think that we were the end result, and so God set up the conditions to allow us to enjoy this planet, which is great considering we can't enjoy most of this planet. I would love to see what's at the bottom of the sea. Wouldn't you? Can't. All these people that have issues with drinking water, wouldn't it be nice if we could just drink most of the water that's on this planet? Can't do that either. What about all the desert areas that are very difficult for human life? The high mountain areas that are very difficult for human life? These are regions that we can't easily live in unless we make some pretty big modifications to our clothing, the type of housing that we make. These aren't areas that are just for us because of God. So it is a bit odd. I mean, think about all the wonderful land that we could live in the Arctic Circle or in the Antarctic, but we just can't. Again, if we have a lot of, high-tech equipment or kill a lot of animals to get a lot of fur, yeah, then we can do it. It's still pretty difficult to move around. It's pretty difficult to have a reliable source of food, difficult to have a reliable source of housing material, kindling. These are not regions that are designed for us. Where exactly is designed for humans? Can we think of an area that it's just abundant fresh water, excellent farming, and no natural disasters? Can we think of an area on the planet like that? Then why would they think that the Earth was made for us? And then this universe is made for us. This idea that we need all these stars to tell the time or to tell the difference in the years, to tell how far along in the year we are. That's what the stars are. They're just a really, really fancy calendar. And they exist in a region of the universe that we can't possibly access. Yeah, this was just made for us though. Phantom X writes, "The problem I see with the argument from extremely low chances for any particular mutation or set of mutations is that it presupposes that mutation was intended. My response is, think of a beach. What are the chances that every grain of sand were already exactly in this position and orientation? Pretty low, right? Now what are the chances that there is a beach that was here in some configuration? Nearly 1. What they're doing is they're looking at the beach and amazed that the beach has a specific configuration. That only works if something intended that configuration. If nothing did, then that configuration is just attained out of all the possible configurations. There is a possible world where no organism ever evolved eyes. There isn't a possible world where no organism evolved." I like that beach argument. That's what I was trying to get at with this idea of the earthquake. That there was an earthquake that caused just catastrophic damage to the previous life forms that were there. And from that damage, a new set of life forms evolved. To those new sets of life forms, to think like a creationist would be to say that this earthquake manufactured specifically that this amount of things collapsed in this way, that this many people died in this area, which nourished this amount of soil in this amount of way, and so on. So this totally natural, pretty awful accident is something that we would consider, as the new life form creationists, this exact and wonderful thing. And we might even come up with reasons why those previous life forms had to be killed. Maybe they displeased the creator, for example. This idea too, as you mentioned, it's that it does presuppose a mutation. It's sort of like the argument that Hank put forth, which we've all heard before, about all of these monkeys using all of these typewriters. They're never going to produce anything with Shakespeare. Nobody is saying that Shakespeare was the intent. If you have that as the intent, okay. But if you have just a bunch of monkeys hammering away at a bunch of typewriters, whatever they produce is whatever they produce. And if that's something that's interesting and workable, so be it. If not, oh well. And that's really all we're saying with the evolution and natural random mutations. This idea too about there is a possible world where no organism ever evolved eyes. We already have that here on the planet. There are regions of the earth where there's very, very little to no sunlight. And so the animals there either never evolved eyes or over time lost their eyes. There's just no need for them. So we don't even have to consider it as a possibility. We already know that it happens. And as you said, there isn't a possible world where no organism evolved. Now, I can't say that for certain, of course. I haven't been to all these possible worlds. But if we look at the earth again, we look at things like extremophiles. That's one of the things I love showing to my students, these shrimp and crabs that live near this incredibly hot volcanic vent underwater. That the heat that they live in, it's more than the temperature at which water boils. And it just makes you like, how, you can boil a shrimp in 100 degrees Celsius, but these guys are living at 300 degrees Celsius and they're just not cooked. It's so interesting. It's so fun. And there's other types of bacteria that grow in these rocks and they don't even necessarily use water. They don't need a lot of water. And of course tardigrades, right, that can exist in so many different kinds of environments. And it just seems that life is pretty cool and it's gonna be there, but the idea that it has to be us, it has to be special, I don't know, I think the tardigrade being able to survive a long time under a lot of different conditions, maybe that's God's favorite. Jared Valkering explains a bit more about why Darwin's books are being used so inappropriately by creationists. The way creationists quote Darwin's opening paragraph on the evolution of the eye is the schoolbook example of a quote mine as you found. Darwin was, in fact, a gold mine for quote miners. He used a writing style of starting his chapters by first accurately and strongly presenting the objections people could and did have, and then explaining why the objections don't hold up. As such, there are many, many places in which he expresses, quote, doubt on evolution. Yeah, and again, we just read it together. For myself, I've heard of it. It's just nothing I've ever looked up. So this was my first time looking it up, and I was pretty surprised about how it was so obvious. How could anybody read that and think, oh yeah, this guy's doubting evolution? Whoever brought that out first into the creationist argument arsenal, that person did that on purpose. There's no way this person was being genuine and really believing that Darwin questioned it. They were just hoping that nobody would look it up and they would just keep repeating whatever they were saying. And hey, Hank's playing right into that idea anyway, because he keeps quoting things that are quoted from other creationists. So he's not even checking it out for himself either. Great Caesar's Ghostwriter, I love that username. Explains this argument from probability in a little bit of a different way, which I enjoy. The argument from probability assumes a one-by-one sequence that must occur precisely to achieve the desired quote-unquote end. For example, A to B to C to yes. A to B to D, nope. What actually happens though is that these reactions that may or may not produce that sequence occur by the millions simultaneously. And this is that phrase, about evolution occurring on the species level as opposed to occurring on the individual level. I don't know if Hank knows that, has heard it and doesn't understand it, or knows it and chooses to ignore it. Which one do you guys think it is? Stephen Myers again echoes my frustration. Okay, Hank, if you present anything in a way that doesn't make sense, then it doesn't make sense. Here's a novel postulate. Present evolution in the way it's actually presented. Remember, Stephen, that was him being incredibly generous to us evolutionists by actually presenting an argument similar to anything that an evolutionist, quote unquote, would say. The question is he doing this on purpose? Or is he just that? I hate using the word, but is he just that dumb? Is he really? Our boy Hank seems to be a couple standard deviations off to the left. Junior Pence gives us a recommendation from They Might Be Giants with their song Science is Real, and I responded back with the comment about how Hank was writing something about the sun's distance, and the line from "the sun is a massive incandescent gas" popped into my head. It's about 93 million miles away, and that's why it looks so small. Jared Valkering predicted the fine-tuning argument when I asked you guys about the chance thing. So when you asked what we expected with the chapter titled Chance, first I expected the fine-tuning argument. Not that this would have anything to do with evolution, but since when has that stopped any apologist from bringing it up? Next, I thought of the whole mutations are so unlikely to produce the results we're looking for. And yeah, you absolutely nailed it. I was just so taken aback by the fine-tuning of Earth, because it's supposed to be about debunking evolution, yet we get the distance from the sun and we get the seasons and the ice floating, and why? What does that have to do with evolution? If anything, that just says, hey, look, these are some conditions under which organisms can evolve. Joseph Taylor brings up the game Yahtzee. Statistically, the chance of rolling a Yahtzee is 1 followed by a bunch of zeros. Yet, everyone who's played Yahtzee has seen someone roll a Yahtzee. Yeah, but you get multiple tries and you're aiming for a specific goal, but it's still a lot of zeros to come up every day. That's a great point, and it really brings home this idea about this average or on average phrasing that Hank used, where I mentioned, yeah, maybe it could take up to that many tries, but it could also take 1. It could also take 10. It doesn't have to take this astronomically huge number. It could just be half of that, or a quarter of that, or again, 10 tries. Great Caesar's Ghostwriter adds that when listening to apologists, I have to keep reminding myself that they and I are playing different games. While I think that I'm playing backgammon, they are playing Parcheesi. The finished product of the apologetics industrial complex is a multitude of churches comprising a multitude of parishioners contributing a multitude of local currency. The job of the individual apologist is, to put it somewhat rudely, keeping butts in pews. It's also useful for me to remember a saying by the writer Upton Sinclair, quote, "It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it," end quote. And I think that's where we're going to start our next chapter. So chapter 5 is titled Empirical Science. And here's when we get to pause the video and type your guesses in the comment section below to see what do you think this is going to be about. So our next chapter, chapter 5, is titled Empirical Science. Feel free to pause the video now and type your guesses in the comment section below. What do you think this is going to cover? I think it's going to cover this idea that the creationists tend to have about historical science versus science that you can do in a laboratory. I think they'll touch on this idea that because a miracle is rare or a once-in-a-lifetime thing, or because a miracle is the suspension of natural order, that we cannot test miracles. So something like God creating life the first time, that's not something we could actually test, even if we are Christians who, quote unquote, believe in science. And I think they're going to mention the Miller-Urey experiment and maybe about how, yes, it could create some organic compounds, but it's not enough, and it also still had to be created. Because I've heard that before, that yes, the Miller-Urey experiment did yield really interesting compounds that, like amino acids and stuff made from inorganic compounds, and it gives us some ideas about abiogenesis and, its possibilities and so on. And I've heard that, yeah, that may be so, but it had to be designed as an experiment by intelligent people, Miller and Urey. So that's what I'm guessing. What do you guys think? Go into the classics section of virtually any video store, really dates this book, and you will find Inherit the Wind, a propaganda piece starring Spencer Tracy and Gene Kelly. It features a fictionalized account of the 1925 Scopes trial, in which a teacher is jailed for violating state law prohibiting the teaching of evolution. Creationists are portrayed as bigoted ignoramuses, while evolutionists are pictured as benevolent intellectuals. Let's see what we got for this footnote. For an excellent analysis of Inherit the Wind, see Philip E. Johnson, Defeating Darwinism by Opening Minds. I see. So this is one thing I recently had to teach my students, is that you're not allowed to give opinions in certain types of writing. So in this type of writing, Hank is trying to convince us just with objective information that evolution is wrong and creationism is correct. That both of those things, right? So it's not just that evolution is wrong and not just that creationism is correct, but he's trying to convince us of both. When you do that, you don't want to include your own opinions, such as excellent, interesting, delicious. These are things that sort of change the way that your writing is going to be perceived, and you're subtly coloring how the reader is going to interpret this stuff. It should just be for a creationist analysis or an analysis that I've read or I've enjoyed. He can say an analysis I think is excellent. That's fine, I guess. But to tell us the analysis is excellent when, Hank, you can't even get the evolutionist argument correct, I don't think that Hank can judge anything as excellent, because I don't think Hank possesses the ability to judge correctly. And I'm not saying that as a general concept of being judgmental or making judgments about other people. I'm sure Hank does that just fine. In fact, we've seen it in the book. I'm talking about Hank being like an assessor of what is a good thing for my life continuing in a way that aligns with reality, and what is something that is the opposite of that. I don't think that Hank possesses that ability. At least that's not really shown to us in this book so far. So for Hank to tell me something is an excellent analysis, when Hank himself can't analyze his way out of a wet paper bag, I don't know. It's just, it might be nitpicky, but here we are. In the end, one is left with the notion that believing in the creation model for origins is tantamount to committing intellectual suicide. Do we have to censor that word now on YouTube? In reality, nothing could be farther from the truth. Some of the greatest intellects the world has ever known were defenders of a creation view of origins. So, doesn't matter. They can be really intelligent in one way and not in other ways. The thing I always point out when this gets brought up is with Einstein not understanding quantum anything. Well, I mean, he understood that quantum has small things, but there were things that he didn't understand, like quantum entanglement. He nicknamed spooky action at a distance because he thought it was just BS, and then it turned out that he was wrong. So just because he's a smart guy doesn't mean he's smart in every way all the time. And this is where creationists really mess things up. Just because Hank is unable to wrap his mind around being a good author, making good points, and using good sources, that doesn't mean that he can't be good in other ways. Like, maybe he makes a very good Reuben sandwich. Maybe. I'm not going to hold it against him. Maybe he's an excellent father and husband. He's got 12 kids, and maybe he's actually a really wonderful father. Just because he's bad at one thing doesn't mean he's bad at everything, and in the same way, just because these intellectuals are people that we refer to in history as great intellectuals, that doesn't mean that they're superior in every possible intellectual category. Leonardo da Vinci, who notably existed before Darwin, Are we gonna put that? Because this is not fair. Leonardo da Vinci didn't have a chance to read like the idea of evolution and then make an assessment. This not fair. You can't bring up Da Vinci. What are you gonna bring up next? How we shouldn't build really, really tall skyscrapers because Imhotep he had a limit at which he was gonna build one of the Great Pyramids? Come on. Leonardo da Vinci, considered by some to be the real founder of science. Notice there's no footnote. It's just, there it is. Was a committed creationist. I don't care. I don't care what Da Vinci thought. I don't care. What can Da Vinci demonstrate? Robert Boyle, the father of modern chemistry, as well as the greatest physical scientist of his generation, was a great apologist for the Genesis account of origins. Cool, so noted non-biologist who also never heard of evolution by natural selection also defended Genesis. Fantastic. Are we going to name anybody after Darwin? Isaac Newton, a prodigious intellect who developed calculus, discovered the law of gravity. Do you mean he defined it? I mean, at least he said the law of gravity. He didn't say discovered gravity. And designed the first reflecting telescope, not only refuted atheism, but also strongly defended the biblical account of creation. Okay, again, so what? Joel Osteen, don't care. This guy is a guy that I would never go to ask him how to live my life in a moral way. But I would definitely go to this guy for his skincare routine. Look at this. He's 63. He's 63. Yeah. I'll go to him for he knows what he's doing for his skincare, whatever it is, okay? And if it's prayer, I'll damn try prayer too. But look at this skin. This is a man who knows what he's doing in one facet of his life. That doesn't mean that we're going to follow him for everything else he says. Demonstrably good skin. Demonstrably whatever he's doing is working. That doesn't mean that he knows everything about everything. In the same way, I don't care that Newton was cool with calculus. That doesn't mean he understands the origins of everything, and that we should listen to him about the origins of everything. If I have a question about Newtonian physics, I will be sure to ask Newton. If I have a question about how human evolution occurred, probably going to ask an evolutionary biologist, not Newton. And if Newton says a bunch of stuff that doesn't match what evolutionary biologists have to say, I'm not going to listen to Newton just because he's Newton. But for Hank, and a lot of creationists like him, they've got this idea that authority speaks volumes. They don't have the idea that demonstrating facts speaks volumes. It's just authority speaks volumes. He really thinks he's doing something by name dropping major figures in history. Louis Pasteur, okay, at least we get somebody who was a contemporary of Darwin. Well known for the process of pasteurization and for utterly demolishing the concept of spontaneous generation, was devoutly religious and strongly opposed to Darwinian evolution. This is another thing that creationists do. They don't understand the difference between spontaneous generation as it was understood in the past, which was just overnight entire life forms are fully formed and spring into existence. Like a maggot just springs into existence overnight. A mouse springs into existence overnight. They don't understand the difference between that and abiogenesis. So he's really saying, or he's really thinking he's saying, that Louis Pasteur disproved abiogenesis. And that's not the case. Utterly demolished it. Okay. Now let's see. What are we going to get? I'm guessing it's going to be something about Pasteur written in another book by a creationist, and Hank is quoting the creationist book. Yep. Discussion adapted from Henry M. Morris, Men of Science, Men of God, Great Scientists Who Believe in the Bible. Discussion adapted. The hell does that mean? It's not even as quoted from? That's even worse. You know, Hank he's one of those interesting guys. You already set the bar so low. That's why I painted a frown on my face, because I already knew I was going to be unhappy reading this. And he lowers it even more. You know, every time you set the bar low, Hank sees it as a challenge. Can I go lower? And he always meets that challenge. Always rises to the occasion. Lowers to the occasion, if you will. Good job, Hank. It's rare to find that. It's rare to find somebody that's just wrong this many times. I take it back. Maybe he can't make a Rubik's husband, and maybe he's a terrible father and terrible, terrible husband. You know, I'm losing faith slowly in Hank's ability to do anything if this is his thought process. Dr. Henry Morris devoted a book to, quote, men of science and men of God, end quote. Isn't that the title? It's part of the title. Anyway, anyway, forget it. Whatever. I can't, nitpicking here. It's like dusting something off after a building has been completely demolished, you know, and just saying like, oh, this pen has a little dust on it. It's pointless. The whole thing's ruined. You know, why are you sitting here focusing on the minutia? Come on, Ms. Lemon, get it together. Dr. Henry Morris devoted a book to men of science and men of God, which includes other intellects, including Johannes Kepler, scientific astronomy, Francis Bacon, scientific non-kosher method, Blaise Pascal, mathematician, Carolus Linnaeus, biological taxonomy, Gregor Mendel, genetics, Michael Faraday, electromagnetics, and Joseph Lister, antiseptic surgery. I don't know why, I just feel like I wanted to see Nikola Tesla on this, and then for some reason I just thought, no, Hank would think that Tesla is like a Satanist. That feels like it's true, right? I think that Hank would legitimately believe that Tesla is a communist Satanist, like a Satan-loving commie. That just feels like something he would think. Let's see this footnote. Adapted from the previous and Fred Hurine's Show Me God revised edition. Okay. So what? It's just like, here's a list of people. This is where I got the list. All right, cool. Albert Einstein, one of the greatest intellects of modern times, also came to the conclusion that God did not create by chance, but rather that he worked according to the planned mathematical, teleonomic, and therefore, to him, rational guidelines. And that's a quote. Let's see where it's from. Let me guess. Morris or C.S. Lewis? A.E. Wilder Smith, he who thinks has to believe. Wilder Smith writes, it is of course clear that Einstein did not claim to be a Christian. His convictions in metaphysical matters reached only to a firm belief in a creator, which motivated Einstein's research in mathematics and physics. Okay, well, at least he's pointing out he wasn't a Christian. Let's just find out where this quote comes from, just to see some context. I was hoping this was a quote from the book, that it was the author quoting something Einstein said, and I don't know. Doesn't seem like it. This quote, I can't find it anywhere. I find other stuff about Einstein and Google saying, let's try to find Einstein plus some of these other search terms, but there's nothing that actually points to this exact quote. So I'm assuming it just comes straight out of that book that he's talking about. The end. It actually isn't anything that Einstein said. It's something that the author has decided after reading some things that Einstein said. And that's as best as we can do, because Hank has not given us much. Rather than falling for rhetoric and emotional stereotypes, such as those presented in Inherent the Wind, these men were deeply committed to reason and empirical science. Like them, we would do well to test the theory of evolution in the light of the laws of science instead of trying them in the court of public opinion. I mean, fine, I'm not going to say rhetoric and emotional stereotypes are a good thing, so let's go ahead and see what amazing empirical science Hank is going to present us with. Effects and their causes. In 2001, A Space Odyssey, astronauts exploring the moon discovered an obelisk. Moviegoers immediately understood the import of the discovery. They may not have known whether the obelisk was designed by space aliens, angels, or the lost civilization of Atlantis, but they did know an intelligent being had previously been to the moon. Had the plot of the movie attempted to suggest that the obelisk was an effect without an intelligent cause, it would have been laughed out of theaters. A ho ho ho. And this has a footnote. I wonder what it's going to be. Oh. Discussion adapted from Michael J. Behe, Darwin's Black Box, The Biochemical Challenge to Evolution. So this isn't even anything that anybody even came up with on their own, like for Hank to just say. Hank could have just said this, because it's just his opinion. It's a speculation that if the movie did something differently, the audience would have reacted a certain way. It's just a speculation, and Hank couldn't even come up with that by himself. He had to adapt it from something that another creationist said. Hank, I'm really rethinking the Reuben. I am. I think I'm hungry. I can't get good pastrami in Korea, But a Reuben with kimchi, actually, that would... I'm gonna figure that out. I'm gonna figure it out. I'll make a video about that. At least we got that idea out of this terrible book. So see, out of the murky primordial crap that is this book, we can still get something interesting and delicious. So, hopefully delicious. And then on the screen, if you guys aren't watching, there's just a sketch of the obelisk on the moon. And it looks like a fireball or a fiery asteroid, but it should be, I think, Earth kind of behind it. The moon looks really mountainous. That's interesting. All right. I mean, I know parts of it is, but I would have expected more flat. And again, dusting off the pen in the building explosion. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that effect. An obelisk must have a cause, designer, greater than itself. This is a phrase I hate. What does it mean, greater than itself? What is that supposed to... What does that mean? What does that mean? Greater than itself. Let's say that a person, right, creates artificial intelligence. Let's say it's really good, passes a Turing test, all that handsome fanciness. And then that person who is the creator of artificial intelligence passes away. But the AI doesn't, because it doesn't. It's not living. Does that mean that the AI is greater than the creator because it didn't pass away? Or that the creator is greater because it was a living thing not tied to being stuck in some kind of computer? But being stuck in a computer is not that bad. If you're attached to the internet, you could go anywhere on the planet very, very quickly. So wouldn't that make it better or greater than that creator? But then the creator is human, and I know Hank has this bias about humans being the pinnacle of creation, so would that make it... This is what I mean. It's not... Hank wants to go on about empirical science, this, that, and the other thing, but we don't have any definitions being given. Greater in which way? So an obelisk, same idea. The creator, the designer, is no longer here. Their body and bones have very likely just become one with the dust of time. There's a very small chance that they would have been frozen for a really long time, mummified really well, whatever, right? So the creator of this obelisk is probably now equivalent to dirt. Doesn't that mean that the obelisk is greater because it has longer lasting or longer standing power? That it has retained its conceived shape, the obelisk shape, longer than the creator has obtained or maintained its shape, which is a body. So would this make it greater? It also can exist on the moon. It doesn't need food, it doesn't need water, it doesn't need some kind of atmosphere to breathe like one of the creators of the obelisk probably would have needed. It's here being a message of sorts. The creator is absent. Is the creator greater because they could make the message, or is the obelisk greater because it delivered them? Again, it's not explained. So let's just keep that in mind as we keep reading. As Fred Heron points out, quote, "This is common sense, and no one has ever observed an exception." Well, I mean, did I? Okay. Okay. I mean, not to mention common sense, it just means this is something people commonly believe. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's true or it's a good idea. But all right. Even Julie Andrews sings about it, quote within a quote, "Nothing comes from nothing, nothing ever could," and that second quote. Okay, good. So because Julie Andrews sings about it, it's a truism. We gotcha. All right. That every effect must have a cause is a self-evident truth, not only for those who have been trained in logic, but for those thinking people everywhere, end quote. But except God, right? We're gonna do the God first cause argument. Great. And the footnote just says it's from page 88. Cool. Cause and effect, quote, "which is universally accepted and followed in every field of science, relates every phenomenon as an effect to a cause. No effect is ever quantitatively, quote, greater, end quote, nor qualitatively superior, quote, to its cause. An effect can be lower than its cause, but never higher." So again, what do we mean by greater? What do we mean by lower? Like quantitatively greater, qualitatively superior? Quantitatively greater. I mean, Hank has created with his wife 12 children. 12 is more than one, so he has created more in quantity than himself, right? Am I Am I just totally missing this? Is the blood makeup on my temple actual blood now? Because I just, this book is that bizarre and poorly written that it's making me bleed out of my head. Then this also comes from Morris, Scientific Creationism, Public School Edition. Oh, gross. Ew. What do you mean public school edition? Please don't tell me this was in the San Diego public schools. Doesn't sound like a San Diego thing. 1981, though. It sounds like a Hank thing. In stark contrast, the theory of evolution attempts to make the effects such as organized complexity, life, and personality greater than their causes, disorder, non-life, and impersonal forces. So again, is personality greater than impersonal forces? I don't know. I have a personality, right? You have a personality, but an impersonal force such as a tsunami could delete us. It is greater than us. It is more powerful than us. As has been well said, quote, teleology is a lady without whom no biologist can exist, yet he is ashamed to be seen with her in public. Design requires a designer, and this is precisely what is lacking in non-theistic or materialistic evolution. This comes from Kenneth Boa and Larry Moody. I'm glad you asked. I can't tell what kind of book this is. Let's check it out. Oh, Hank didn't include the full title. I'm glad you asked. In-depth answers to difficult questions about Christianity. Thanks, Hank. Fantastic. So what is this again? Because it's like my brain understands this is nonsense and it just kind of falls out. It's not even attempting to retain 90% of what I'm reading. The materialistic evolution. So they're basically saying, what is it? Every scientist, they know that teleology is like totally super true, but they're like really embarrassed to admit that deep down they believe it. So what is this? Romans 1:20 just repackaged. Okay, great. In the television series Cosmos, Carl Sagan boldly pontificated, but is never proved, his premise that, quote, the cosmos is all that is or ever was or ever will be, end quote. We get a footnote here from Carl Sagan. Cosmos, the PBS television series Cosmos, was closely scripted after his book. Now, this idea that he boldly pontificated, the way that I always interpreted this was he was just saying, when we just want to refer to all of existence collectively, we're going to call it cosmos. I think that if in Sagan's lifetime there ever was solid evidence of some kind of deity that was existing outside of our known universe, Carl would just say, this is part of the cosmos. Just as I'm part of the cosmos as a living being, so too is this creator deity that is a part of the cosmos as well. So I think this was just him saying it's just everything in existence as a collective term, and when he uses the word cosmos, that's what he's referring to. I think that Hank doesn't understand what an operational definition is versus just people making dumb statements, which is what he does. And I think because he doesn't understand the difference, this is where it gets confusing. I think that Hank is saying the cosmos is material in nature, and the only thing that ever can exist is material in nature. The end. I'm Carl Sagan. Quote me forever saying that because I'm right. And that's why he said he never proved. I don't think he really understands what that was used for. I tried finding it beyond that, and I couldn't, but I did find two things that I wanted to share with you. One of them comes from John C. Lennox. I guess he's the author of Can Science Explain Everything? At the beginning of his famous TV series Cosmos, the American astronomer and cosmologist Carl Sagan said, blah, 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 cosmos. That is not a statement of science to be put in the same category as, for example, the scientific statement that gravity obeys an inverse square law. Sagan's statement is simply an expression of his atheistic belief. The problem is, many people give to all statements by scientists the authority rightly due to science simply because they are stated by a scientist. Do you mean many people? Do you mean Christians? Because that's what you guys are doing, right? Is Lennox calling out Hank right now? Because Hank is saying, well, because Newton had good ideas, when he's also talking about things that are other ideas, those things are true if they're about God. But if he's got ideas that aren't about God, those are wrong. Well, this is again, with this authority idea, this is such a Christian or monotheistic thing, really. But I did find this. It's a clip from Pale Blue Dot, and it's just titled Carl Sagan pale blue dot. And Astro Piazzolla writes, I grew up in poverty in South Korea during the 70s. I must have been about 10 or 11 years old when I watched Carl Sagan's Cosmos on our tiny TV, and it made a huge impression on me. I remember saving money to buy the book, translated into Korean, which I still own. I ended up migrating to Australia and eventually completed a PhD in theoretical physics. Thank you, Carl, for inspiring a young person so far away. It seems we were also connected to each other on this tiny blue dot. Thank you, Astro Piazzolla, for giving us a beautiful reprieve from the total crap that we are reading. In stark contrast, Albert Einstein humbly acknowledged that, quote, the harmony of natural law, ... reveals an intelligence of such superiority that, compared with it, all the systematic thinking and acting of human beings is an utterly insignificant reflection, end quote. This comes from Albert Einstein's Ideas and Opinions, The World as I See It from 1974, as quoted in Heeren. Heeren also writes that in 1917, Albert Einstein published a paper interpreting his theory of general relativity and made it conform to the cosmology of his day, the static universe theory. This claimed that the universe is infinite in age, thus relieving the scientific community of having to deal with questions about the ultimate origin of the cosmos. Einstein was so convinced that these views were correct that he added what is now seen as a cosmological fudge factor to his theory. Only after Einstein had seen evidence for an expanding universe by looking through Hubble's 100-inch telescope for himself did he formally renounce that his cosmological fudge factor, concerning which he later wrote, "The biggest blunder of my life." After this, Einstein wrote not only of the necessity of a beginning, but also of his desire to, quote, know how God created the world. But this is adapted from Heeren. This is not quoted from anything Einstein himself actually wrote. So what? Right? So what? Also, it's kind of interesting. So when Einstein makes a mistake and then he learns what's true, that's science. But then the idea of like Nebraska man, that's scientists can't be trusted. It's a hoax. Okay. So when Einstein learns with other types of science that he's wrong and updates his thinking, good on him. As long as it leads him closer to something that sounds like intelligent design, right? But anything that happens with evolutionary biology, nope, hoax, evil, cannibalism, whatever. Okay. Long before Albert Einstein, another prodigious intellect, the Apostle Paul. Okay. Now, Paul, if you've seen any of my other videos, I think that Paul is essentially the first televangelist. He's just like, wow, I could really scam people using this Jesus character. So that's my view of Paul. He said essentially the same thing, quote, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. Didn't I just say Romans 1:20? Didn't I say, well, not just, but I said it, right? I said it earlier in this video already. And here it is. Yeah, wow. You know, every time we read this book, it just keeps demonstrating that I'm far more of a prophet than anybody from Hank's camp. In commenting on this passage, Fred Heeren says, this self-evident truth is the simple rational deduction that all we see is an effect which demands a very great supernatural cause. The sun and the stars, the moon and this earth could not have come from nothing. That's irrational. Well, what do we mean nothing? Why are you saying it has to be a very great supernatural cause, capital C, or nothing? What if it's just like a natural cause? A very great natural cause? A not so great supernatural cause? Why couldn't it be that? Why is it just, okay, what I just said makes more sense than this. That's irrational, not just to the Western mind, but to the human mind. That's a weird statement. Every phenomenon in the universe can be explained in terms of something else that caused it. But when the phenomenon in question is the existence of the universe itself, there is nothing in the universe to explain it, no natural explanation. Okay, but let's just replace some of this. Every phenomenon in the universe can be explained in terms of something else that caused it. But when the phenomenon in question is God himself, there is nothing in the universe to explain it, no natural explanation. So I guess God had to have a supernatural cause, capital C, which is very great and greater than him. And this, again, is just telling us Heeren's book. That's it. One more point needs to be made before we move on. Does it? What point did you make here? You haven't made a point yet, Hank. In saying that the universe is an effect that requires a cause equal to or greater than itself. You did not say cause equal to or greater than. You said cause much, much greater than. You said greater than. What are you talking about, equal to or greater than? Now he just doesn't even remember what he wrote. Look, I get it if I don't remember everything Hank wrote, and I get it if you don't remember everything Hank wrote, but if Hank can't remember what he wrote 3 paragraphs ago, there is a problem. Not only is there a problem, there is a problem so great that I question his ability. Well, I've been questioning his ability to kind of understand anything, haven't I? This is just one more piece of evidence in that little bucket. All right. One may well presume that this principle would equally apply to God. Okay, good, great. This, however, is clearly not the case. Oh good, special pleading. Unlike the universe, which, according to modern science, had a beginning, God is eternal. Thus, an eternal being, God can be demonstrated logically to be the uncaused first cause, which, of course, again, special pleading. Well, how do we know God is eternal? Even if he is greater than the universe, it just means he's older than. It doesn't mean he is without age. It doesn't mean that he cannot die, right? That's not what this means. Also, the idea of cosmos being like everything inside the universe, and if there's anything outside of the universe, it encompasses that too. The cosmos itself could be eternal. So if we're looking at it just from that purely, to use their terminology, materialistic worldview, if we're looking at it just that way, then the cosmos is going to be the uncaused first cause. You know, they already have an issue with this idea that, you know, you can't create or destroy matter, so how come then we created matter out of nothing, aka the Big Bang, right? They like to use that phrase. And so I always thought, well, not always, but I thought much later after I was Christian, well, if you're okay with matter being an eternal constant, then how come matter couldn't just be the thing that exists? And matter interacts with other matter, and perhaps that's where the Big Bang started. So again, this kind of like outside the universe cosmos, the big universe or the big cosmos, right? So outside of the universe, in the cosmos, if you're accepting that matter cannot be created or destroyed, then we just have matter. And it interacts, and sometimes when it interacts, it does a thing, and sometimes that thing is a universe happens. Why couldn't it be that? They're already okay with matter just existing. Why couldn't it just exist in the same way they think God could just exist? So let's check out 12, the footnote. Well, it's a big one. The argument for God is as an uncaused cause goes as follows. Oh, okay, we know that. While modern science affirms the fact that the universe had a beginning and thus is not eternal, the materialist is left with a dilemma. Either the universe sprang from nothing by chance, or something unbounded by time and greater than the universe caused it to come into being. Again, no point in creating this false dichotomy. Really just shows how, I don't, is it disingenuous? Is it unoriginal? Is it uncreative? I don't know. It's not thinking. Whatever it is, it's not thinking. In other words, either something came from nothing or something is eternal. Okay, so again, okay. Since we have previously demonstrated the absurdity of suggesting that something comes from nothing, so again, you didn't demonstrate it, number one, and number two, that's not what anybody is saying, that something came from nothing. The only people saying that are creationists. We are forced to conclude that the universe was caused by something greater than itself, something or someone who ultimately is not dependent on anything else in order to exist, something or someone who possesses the power of being intrinsically and therefore is eternal, this eternal being we call God. Now wait, you just said something or someone. Something or someone. This eternal someone we call God. Why couldn't it just be cosmos with existing matter? Why? You just said, Hank, twice, the phrase something or someone. Something or someone. Therefore, someone is God. Bizarre. Some might say that if the universe needs a cause, then the cause of the universe too needs a cause. This sort of reasoning is what led thinkers like Bertrand Russell to wonder who or what created God. But we can easily see where this reasoning leads. Either we would have an infinite regression of finite causes to account for the universe, which is self-contradictory and illogical. It doesn't answer the question of source, it merely makes the effects more numerous. Or we must postulate that everything that ever exists comes from nothing by chance, which is also self-refuting. Okay, again, not with the false dichotomy. What are you doing? Or We can practice good science and encounter an uncaused cause. What is the good science here? That is, at best, the start of a hypothesis. This isn't good science. This is, again, but this is what they think. Creationists really think this. They really think that science is just making stuff up because they don't understand the word theory in science doesn't mean an educated guess. So Hank really thinks he's on something here, but no, he doesn't, because this is adapted from some other creationist who adapted it from some other creationist. So Hank doesn't even probably think that he's making a good point. He's thinking that other people are making the good point for him, and he feels good about that, because it's more people thinking it. Russell's counter, that if God doesn't need a cause, and neither does the universe, completely ignores that the nature of the universe is finite, changing, and therefore not eternal. Right, so cosmos. So it is reasonable to ask who made the universe. But sir, you just said something or someone. Why are we asking who made the universe instead of how did the universe come to be? He just wrote it. He just wrote it, and he forgot that he already accounted for a non-being in what I don't have any pearls to clutch, so I'm just gonna strangle myself. That's what I'm gonna do instead. Oh. God, however, doesn't need a cause because he is infinite and eternal. Why does he have to be infinite, and why does he have to be eternal? Why couldn't he just be the thing that was already here, and then after creating the universe, he just dies? So he could have been an uncaused first cause, and then he's already dead. Just because he's an uncaused first cause, that doesn't mean he's eternal. They're just bringing all of this in because it's what they already believe. We know this, but I mean, can you just imagine though if God really was the uncaused first cause, but he died 14 billion years ago in creating the universe? It was like a science experiment, and it did literally explode, and that's where the universe came from, but in the explosion God died. That's it. That's good. That's what we believe now in the lemon cult, okay? However, he's creating a very delicious glass of lemonade, and it just, boom, oops. The universe must depend on something that can account for its own existence, something eternal and therefore uncaused. Again, it doesn't have to be eternal, it just has to be first. So, okay, come on. All right, the next section is energy conservation. Today's physical sciences are built on the 3 laws of thermodynamics that describe energy. I did, right? I just said this. I just said the thing about matter and energy. Are they bringing it up? Are they bringing it up? They're of course going to bring up the thing about entropy and everything naturally goes to chaos, but because they don't understand it. But okay. I love that they're proving me to be a prophet. I love this. Describes our relationship with matter in the universe. And the first law of thermodynamics, conservation of energy, says that total energy in all its forms can neither be created or destroyed, only shifted from one type to another. Okay, we're there. We did it. We did it. All hail the lemon. The second law of thermodynamics, law of entropy, is one of the several equivalent formulations, says that the amount of disorder in any isolated system cannot decrease with time. While the total energy in the cosmos remains constant, the amount of energy available to do useful work is always getting smaller. Definitely describes Hank's brain power. The third law of thermodynamics says that the entropy of any pure crystal at absolute zero temperature is equal to 0. In a perfect crystal at absolute zero, there is perfect order. Okay, so cool. That's where we're at. All right, so now we know. Let's go. Now we can understand everything, right? These laws were established as scientific discipline by Lord William Kelvin, a committed Christian who, like Einstein, was a brilliant intellect. The new Encyclopedia Britannica states that he published hundreds of papers, was granted multiple patents, and it was said of Lord Kelvin that he was quote, was entitled to more letters after his name than any other man in Britain, end quote. So we're just establishing him as big authority, capital B, capital A, trademark. One of his greatest contributions to science was his role in the development of the law of energy conservation, footnote, which is just the new Encyclopedia Britannica. Okay. We get a picture, for some reason, of evolutionist Dr. Isaac Asimov describes energy conservation as the most powerful and most fundamental generalization about the universe scientists have ever been able to make. And we've got a picture of Isaac Asimov in front of some of his books. Like the law of cause and effect. Does he know that that's not a real law? Okay. The law of energy conservation is an empirical law of science. Also known as the first law of thermodynamics, the law of energy conservation states that while energy can be converted from one form to another, it can neither be created nor annihilated. I like how again, Hank just likes to, he's one of those guys that I don't think he trusts his own ability to be convincing. And he just really wants to sound like an intellectual. So he's like, created or destroyed? No, not destroyed. One of my 12 kids, get me the thesaurus. Because he can't do anything modernized. He needs it from, like, a thesaurus from 1981. And he looks through it and he goes, annihilation. That's good. All right, annihilation. Tap, tap, tap on his keyboard. Do you think he wrote this by hand? The energy equivalence of mass can be determined using Einstein's familiar formula, E equals mc squared. E is energy, m is mass, and c represents the speed of light. I like how he just, again, throws that in there. You're not adding to the conversation. Okay. According to Isaac Asimov, it, quote, is considered one of the most powerful and fundamental, it's the same thing we just read, and then it's got the quote here, Isaac Asimov, in the game of energy and thermodynamics, you can't even break even. Journal of Smithsonian Institute. Oh, as quoted in Heron, also in Morris. Okay. So we could... I like that he took the time to read 2 creationist books that referenced the thing from a evolutionist, but he didn't take any time to actually read the source material. Okay. Fred Heron notes that the first law of thermodynamics means that neither mass nor energy can appear from nothing. Such an occurrence would be a free lunch, as Big Bang theorist Alan Guth likes to say, in contradiction to the common sense notion that there is no free lunch. We got a free lunch idea of a Kimchi Reuben from this. And clearly, Hank's writing amounts to a hill of nothing. So, we win again. And yet, there is no denying that the universe is here. So, the universe itself appears to be a free lunch. But from the laws of physics we see operating today, creation is impossible as an ongoing event. That is, the conditions that we know today hold true in our present universe, prevent any possibility of matter springing out of nothing today. Okay, but they're building this up a lot just so they can misrepresent what the Big Bang is. So therefore, all those evolutionists saying that the universe came from nothing, they're just wrong. And nobody's saying that. I don't even want to read this. I just want to get to the part where he says it so I can say, good, we saved time. Can we read it faster? From a purely logical point of view, it should be self-evident that nothing comes from nothing. Oh, geez. It's just right there. We didn't even have to go that far. Okay. In other words, it is illogical to believe that something could come from nothing. This is precisely what philosophical naturalism, the worldview undergirding evolutionism, presupposes. This is a comedy now, you guys. I thought I was here for science. We're here for comedy, folks. This is analogous to the 19th century concept of spontaneous generation, or what Michael Behe humorously refers to as Calvinism. Oh, interesting. Gotta get those Calvinists, Behe. Calvin is always jumping into a box with his stuffed Tiger Hobbs. Oh, I thought he meant Calvinism. Okay, and traveling back in time, or transmogrifying himself into animal shapes, or using it as a duplicator, or making clones of himself. A little boy like Calvin easily imagines a box can fly like an airplane or something, because Calvin doesn't know how airplanes work. Well, good. So Calvin is Hank? Is Calvin Behe? In some ways, grown-up scientists are just as prone to wishful thinking as little boys like Calvin. For example, centuries ago, it was thought that insects and other small animals arose directly from spoiled food. Now, I think it's so funny that he's there saying, like, ha, look at this stupid thing people believed with no evidence. Anyway, Jesus Christ rose from the dead. You know what I mean? So, okay, look at this stupid thing that these grown-up scientists believe. Anyway, outside of the universe, there is an infinite, eternal God that loves us because he's handcrafted us. And he also wants you to know that you're a really bad person how he made you, but that's okay because his son, Jesus Christ, who was crucified on the cross, came back so that you can keep repenting and telling yourself how bad you are so you can be with him in heaven, which is outside the universe, but in like a spiritual way, not in like a physical way. Grown-up scientists. I like how they're thinking this is so stupid. And we know it's stupid because it's not even, it's just we know it's not true because we tested it and showed that it wasn't true. But then when we use the same scientific method to test things, or when we use the same questions that we would ask somebody from a different religion, we use those same questions on a Christian, they're left upset that we're even posing these questions, and then they throw Romans 1:20 at us that, well, I don't really have to answer you because you actually know God does exist and you're just, get thee behind me, Satan. This was easy to believe because small animals were thought to be very simple. Before the invention of the microscope, naturalists thought that insects had no internal organs, but as biology progressed and careful experiments showed that protected food did not breed life, the theory of spontaneous generation retreated to the limits beyond which science could not detect what was really happening. Okay, in the 19th century, that meant the cell. When beer, milk, or urine were allowed to sit for several days in the containers, even closed ones, they always became cloudy from something growing in them. The microscopes of the 18th and 19th century showed us that the growth was very small, apparently living cells, so it seemed reasonable that simple living organisms could arise spontaneously from liquids. Oh, this is just a lot to say that eventually we learned. Anyway, we're gonna just not do that with how the universe got here, and we're just gonna say God made it. It could be something or someone, but the something is a someone, and that someone is eternal, and it's our infinite God from the Bible specifically. The Christian one, the Protestant Christian one. The Protestant Christian one that's written in the New King James Version because I'm not going to study German, that's satanic. The key to persuading people was the portrayal of the cells as simple. One of the chief advocates of the theory of spontaneous generation in the middle of the 19th century was Ernest Haeckel, a great admirer of Darwin and an eager popularizer of Darwin's theory. From this limited view of cells that microscopes provided, Haeckel believed that the cell was a simple little lump of albuminous combination of carbon, not much different from a piece of microscopic jello. So it seemed to Haeckel that such simple life, with no internal organs, could be produced from inanimate material. Now, of course, we know better. Well, we know about the cell not being simple. That doesn't mean that we know it can't come from inanimate material. And it just cites Behe, 19 cites here, and the next one that we're actually going to check is 20. Likewise, in an age of scientific enlightenment, we should know better than to believe in the evolutionary dogma that presupposes something comes from nothing. Now they're saying that evolution itself is about the cosmology of how the universe began. These guys I was going to say, can we get him a book? But I'm not even sure he knows how to read. Or can he just only read stuff that's been quoted by other creationists? To hold the law of energy conservation is to jettison cartoon characters for the canon, which clearly communicates that since God finished the work of creating, Genesis 2, 1-3, he has been sustaining or conserving all things by his power, Hebrews 1-3. That came out of nowhere. That really did. That really came out of nowhere. Wow. Wow. We just... This is something. This is wild. Wow. I think the makeup blindfold was a good suggestion, because I don't want to see any of this, and even without seeing it, I still somehow know we're going to get there. Okay, so again, it still proves the prophecy. Okay. I mean, just look at where we jumped. Look at how we jumped. We're going to make fun of the idea of spontaneous generation because it sounds silly to us today because we've been able to demonstrate it's not true. Anyway, Genesis 2, 1-3, God's been conserving all things by his power and finished the work of creating. Does he doesn't. He doesn't realize this, does he? He doesn't realize how similar this sounds. He just doesn't. He can't. But I also think it's because he can't remember stuff. We've seen that in his writing so far. Okay. The next section's entropy. I hope it's the last section. I don't want to deal with this crap very much longer. Entropy. While the law of energy conservation is a blow to the theory of evolution, sir, the law of entropy is a bullet to its head. Sir, please. Sir, please. Okay. 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 Not only is the universe dying of heat loss, but according to entropy, also known as the second law of thermodynamics, everything runs inexorably from order to disorder and from complexity to decay. Wait. But you just said from Hebrews 1 through 3 that God is sustaining or conserving all things by his power. And now you're saying that the second law of thermodynamics is that everything decays. That all of the order we see in the world is going towards disorder. But God conserves all things by his power. Did he not just... He didn't. I need a break. I'm gonna pause this. I need a break. This is dumb. This is so dumb. This is dumb. This is like dumb. Okay? This is 3 standard deviations off. Okay? This is dumb. Okay. Alright. The theory of biological evolution directly contradicts the law of entropy in that it describes a universe in which things run from chaos to complexity and order. What? In evolution, atoms allegedly self-produce oh my god. Does he not understand chemistry? No, why would I ask that? He doesn't understand anything. He doesn't. He just doesn't. Okay. Let's just get through this, you guys. Amino acids auto-organize into amoebas. Amoebas turn into apes, and apes eventually evolve into astronauts. You know what? I added words that weren't there. It doesn't change the meaning of the sentence, but I don't know why. My brain just added in extra words. Like, the word eventually wasn't there. I just thought it sounded better. Also, he doesn't know that humans are an ape. Okay. Mathematician and physicist Sir Arthur Eddington demonstrated exactly the opposite is true. The energy of the universe irreversibly flows from hot to cold bodies. And then we saw that footnote is just another one of the creationists. The sun burns up billions of tons of hydrogen each second, stars burn out, and species eventually become extinct. Hank's brain is its own species, and it somehow created itself extinct. Which makes as much sense as everything else he said. Also, if you're not looking at the screen, okay, just save yourself. There's a bridge that's wooden and it says evolution. It's just kind of spelling evolution. And these animals are walking up. There's like a fish that looks kind of like Bloopy from The Simpsons, but only with 2 eyes. There's another fish jumping out of the water. A very nicely drawn frog. What appears to be an iguana. I think that's a wombat. And then there's some kind of, what is that, a bonobo or something? And then I don't know, a very heavy-browed, I'm assuming it's supposed to be Darwin. But then the O in evolution, it's actually being destroyed by this rock that falls from the sky. And the rock says entropy. And the O in entropy is the O in evolution. It's just showing that entropy destroys evolution, and evolution is built so shakily it can be destroyed by entropy. Which, as a creationist, I bet you saw this and you were like, yes, this is so good. And, I'm sure I did too, as a creationist reading this book. Bad book. Oh, there's supposed to be a quote under it, but it's on the next page. If your theory is found to be against the second law of thermodynamics, entropy, I can give you no hope. There is nothing but to collapse in the deepest humiliation. Okay, well, fantastic, because Hank just said that God sustains and conserves all things through his power, and you're saying that's not possible, so I guess Hank can collapse in deepest humiliation. Please do so, Hank. But you know what? He could have just done that from this book itself, even without the entropy comment. This book itself is humiliating to him. While I would fight for a person's right to have faith in science fiction, we must resist evolutionists who attempt to brainwash people into thinking that evolution is science. Now here we actually have a footnote. If one advances all the information on one side of an issue and suppresses information on the other side, that by definition is not education, but an attempt to seduce or trick people into believing a particular story. Some may call it an attempt at brainwashing. So everything that I experienced at church, especially how they suppressed what evolution actually is, lied about it, and then gave us very obviously biased books like this in our Christian bookstore or on Christian radio for us to learn, quote unquote, learn about evolution from. So, Hank's book. Okay. This chapter could have just been titled Telling on Myself. While brainwashing is not actually possible, much of what passes for... That's an interesting phrase for him to do. We'll just leave it. Just dusting off the pen. Much of what passes for science is nothing more than philosophical pontification. Okay, he really likes that phrase, number one. Number two, he really just doesn't understand it. And he's like, well, I don't get it. So they're just like making it up. This is flat earther reasoning. Naturalism, which says that nature is all that exists, has become what Philip Johnson calls, quote, the established religious philosophy of America, end quote. Since when? Since when? Isn't the established religious philosophy Christianity? And anyone who attempts to buck this religious dogma faces tremendous pressure to conform. Oh, never mind. Remember, all the other Christians are fake, and they're following along with just whatever science says, right? For an excellent discussion. So he just, again, it just, using that word. See, Philip E. Johnson, reason in balance. All right, cool. Evolution requires constant violations of the second law of thermodynamics in order to be plausible. But you just did that with your own book. Okay. In the words of Eddington, if your theory is found to be against the second law, so it's the thing that we just read, but now it comes with a footnote. Arthur S. Eddington, The Nature of the Physical World in 1930, as quoted in Scott M. Hughes, The Collapse of Evolution. Wow. Wow. So even something, well, okay. I was going to say even something that he thinks supports what he says. He's not even going to hunt down the original source, but that's what he's been doing this whole time. But he just said that's brainwashing. But he's doing it. He does. What level of damage has occurred in this guy's brain? This is not typical. I mean, even the Frank and Norm book was slightly more reasonable and less contradictory than this. This is in a category by itself. It's just a bad piece of writing. Ignoring all the problems with it in terms of how it aligns with the facts, it's just a really bad piece of writing. I think that Frank and Norm meandered too much, but at least they stayed kind of on task. They kind of meandered but brought it back to what they were going to talk about. This is just bizarre. Rather than humbling themselves in the light of the law of entropy, evolutionists dogmatically attempt to discredit or dismiss it. I also like how that Hank is implying that these guys don't know about it, that somebody has to bring it up. Some creationist has to be like, oh, by the way, gotcha. And then they're looking at it like, I've never seen this in my life. Is this? Well, I mean, you know, some excuse. Obviously, you're stupid because you are a creationist. I mean, that's what they really think is happening. That he's, in this book, he's reminding people that evolutionary biologists have no idea about thermodynamics. First, they contend that the law cannot be invoked because it merely deals with energy relationships of matter, while evolution deals with complex life forms arising from simpler ones. I haven't heard that argument, have you? This, of course, is patently false. As a case in point, contemporary information theory deals with information entropy and mitigates against evolution on a genetic level. And the footnote says the DNA molecule carries instructions for building unfathomably complex living organisms. They're complicated. They're not unfathomably complex. We're like figuring this stuff out as we speak. Thus, information entropy is perfectly relevant to the discussion of evolution on a genetic level. Information theory says that the reduced entropy produced by random deviations is not equivalent to information. Random processes do not produce information, but rather distort information. Thus, random deviations in genetic material will not increase genetic information, which will be necessary for evolution to progress, let alone produce DNA in the first place. As I'm reading this, all I'm thinking of is how Hank is taking information, quote unquote, from evolution or creationists who are taking information from other creationists who are taking information from other creationists who might be quoting an original source somewhere. This is not going to produce anything good or better. This is only going to result in random mutations because of the misunderstandings between the different people in the author chain. And then we end up with whatever the hell this book is. So thank you, Hank. It was very illustrative. I appreciate it. While in an energy conversion system, entropy dictates that energy will decay. In an informational system, entropy dictates that information will become distorted. So congratulations, Hank, you've distorted it. Dr. Henry Morris demonstrates how the second law of thermodynamics, or entropy, can be utilized in various contexts and defined in various ways, such as classical thermodynamics, statistical thermodynamics, and informational thermodynamics. Dr. Morris, by the way, has a degree in hydraulic engineering, and he served on boards of different universities, such as Virginia Tech, and he was the civil engineer, the head of Department of Civil Engineering for the hydraulics, and so on and so forth, and that was fine. He did his creationist stuff, and everything was cool until he left. And then the new guy that replaced him advised him, hey, in all your publications, maybe don't list the creationist stuff because it's going to make you sound nuts. And he's like, ugh. So that's Dr. Morris. So let's learn about entropy in thermodynamics and how that somehow is going to relate to biology from a hydraulics engineer. Let's do that. In the first case, entropy is a measure of the unavailability of energy for further work. In the second case, entropy is a measure of the decreased order of a system structure. And in the third case, it is a measure of lost or distorted information. In any case, what is being described is a downhill trend. Energy becomes unavailable, disorder increases, and information becomes garbled. So again, I don't know how this aligns with their belief from that Hebrews quote, but here we are. As noted in Scientific American, what do you bet he didn't actually read Scientific American? It is certain that the conceptual connection between information and the second law of thermodynamics is now firmly established. Myron Tribus and Edward McIrvin, Energy Information, Scientific American, as quoted in Morris' Scientific Creationism. This guy is allergic to primary sources. Furthermore, it is boldly asserted that entropy does not prevent evolution on Earth, since this planet is an open system that receives energy from the sun. This, of course, is nonsense. The sun's rays never produce an upswing in complexity without teleonomy, the ordering principle of life. In other words, energy from the sun does not produce an orderly structure of growth and development without information and an engine. Is he talking about... So please don't tell me he's talking about solar power. Raw energy is no better than zero energy at producing and sustaining life without something directing it, such as information and machinery. For example, a car sitting on an incline can progress downward but never upward without an engine and a conversion system to direct the raw energy of the gasoline in such a way to perform the work necessary to go uphill. Likewise, plants utilize the raw energy of the sun through a very complicated information-dependent process. Information dependent. They're really Loving to just shove that in there, right? Photosynthesis, without the information and machinery to perform photosynthesis, the sun's radiation would simply burn up the plant, which eventually does happen anyway. Raw energy without teleonomy is like a bull in a china shop, not a means of producing biological evolution. You know what? This book is like a bull in a china shop, not a means of convincing anyone of anything that they don't already believe. If the sun beats down on a dead plant, it does not produce growth, but rather speeds up decay. If, on the other hand, the sun beats down on a living plant, it produces a temporary increase in complexity and growth. In the Origins film series, Dr. A.E. Wilder Smith explains that the difference between a dead stick and a live orchid is that the orchid has teleonomy, which is information that makes the live orchid an energy capturing and order increasing machine. And this is from a videotape by Glashower and Taylor called The Origin of the Universe. Okay. So that's okay. But Cosmos is not. Gotcha. Alright. It's alright, because you see, this one supports what I already think. That's why it's okay. Notice again these phrases they're using. Information, machine. These are phrases he's adding in here just to color how you're interpreting this. Finally, it has been suggested by some evolutionists who appear to suffer from some sort of cognitive dissonance that the law of entropy might not have operated in the distant past. Creationist Dr. Henry Morris points out that this assumption would be tantamount to the denial of the basic assumption of evolutionism, namely that present processes suffice to account for the origin of things. In effect, this device would acknowledge the validity of the creationist approach, acknowledging that special creative processes operating only in the past are necessary to explain the world of the present. Now, this is interesting because I wonder if a lot of these arguments that I guess I don't have to wonder. I was going to say, I wonder if these arguments that no quote-unquote evolutionist, no atheist I've ever heard makes any of these arguments, I wonder if that Hank is not making them up, but if he hears them from other creationists, and so he thinks this is what atheists actually believe. Now I know this without having to actually talk to any atheists. Now I know this is what evolutionists believe without having to read any books by actual evolutionists. That's really what it is, right? Mr. Morris here, Dr. Morris, he did get a doctorate. But he's producing this argument for Hank that I don't think Hank has ever encountered for himself. Thousands of years before empirical science formally codified the law of entropy, Scripture clearly communicated it. The prophet Isaiah and King David both declared that the heavens and earth would wear out like a garment. This is from Isaiah 51:6 and Psalms 102:25-26. Likewise, in the first century, Paul, the apostle, looked forward to the day when the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay. Romans 8:21, emphasis added. Okay, so God is sustaining everything, but also God is not sustaining everything. Fabulous. In summary, it should be noted that that philosophical naturalism, the worldview undergirding evolutionism, didn't we already use this exact phrase? Is he plagiarizing himself? I mean, I know you don't really do that, but I mean, you know what I mean? Just kind of copy pasting stuff. So it should be noted that philosophical naturalism can provide only 3 explanations for the existence of the universe in which we live. Number 1. The universe is merely an illusion. This notion carries little weight in an age of scientific enlightenment. As has been well said, quote, even the full-blown solipsist looks both ways before crossing the street, end quote, with no footnote. Interesting. Number 2, the universe sprang from nothing. As previously demonstrated, this proposition flies in the face of both the laws of cause and effect and energy conservation. There simply are no free lunches. The conditions that hold true in this universe prevent any possibility of matter springing out of nothing. Also, again, we got that weird typing. It's posse dash space ability. I wonder, it's only some of the words are like that. It's so weird. This one does have a footnote. Besides a preponderance of empirical evidence indicating that something does not come from nothing, the simple laws of logic require that nothing can produce anything. This is all just about nothing. Nothing is not anything. It's a violation of the law of non-contradiction, which says that A is not non-A, to say that nothing can produce something. This is just, again, nobody's saying this, and they're making like as big of a case as they can against it, even though nobody's saying it. I'm not saying a good case. I'm just saying a heavy, like, wordy case. But wordy doesn't mean good. It just means wordy. Now, it is possible for something to exist without being in effect, but in order for something to exist and not be in effect, it must be eternal, something that did not come into being but always existed. So again, it just has to have no beginning. I don't know why it has to be eternal and never die. God is such a being. But this fact in no way helps the case for an uncaused effect. If the laws of logic can be violated, then reason and communication are meaningless. Well, so far, your ability to communicate has been meaningless, and I don't see you producing any reasoning. But this is all not even from Hank himself. This comes from Sproul in a book, Not a Chance, The Myth of Chance in Modern Science and Cosmology. And 3, the universe eternally existed. This hypothesis is devastated by the law of entropy, which predicts that a universe that has eternally existed would have died an eternity ago of heat loss. And again, that's not anything that anybody is saying today, so okay. And we'll go to the footnote just to see what it is. Since the laws of thermodynamics remain unquestioned, we know that the total amount of energy available to do work in the universe is not self-replenishing, but is running out. We can assume that the total available energy in the universe is finite, since current cosmological models suggest this state of affairs. Okay, so now we trust science. Okay. Interesting. Furthermore, we see that it is still being accomplished that work is still being accomplished in the universe at this moment, which means we have not yet exhausted our finite supply of available energy, blah, blah, blah. But if the universe eternally existed, then an infinite amount of time has already passed. Infinite time would have consumed our universe's finite time in an infinite past. There would not be enough time. Well, again, who cares? Nobody's arguing this. You even said it's a disproven hypothesis. Come on. There is, however, one other possibility. What, that Hank is wrong? It is found in the first chapter of the book of the Bible. Quote, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Interesting that there's no footnote or anything here. In an age of empirical science, nothing could be more certain, clear, or correct. In an age of empirical science, our best way to explain the world around us is by reading Genesis? That's really what that sentence is saying. Okay. We have used FACE as an acronym to help you remember salient points to respond to the farce of evolution. You should now be equipped to demonstrate that the fossil record is an embarrassment to evolutionists, that ape men are fiction, fraud, and fantasy, that chance, that's our C, not CH, renders evolution not just improbable but also impossible, and that empirical science supports the creation model for origins and militates against the theory of evolution. But there's more. R. And there's no space, period. It's just capital R, capital B-Y. I think they mean R colon, something like that. Probably not RBY. By adding the letter R, we can change the acronym FACE into FARCE. This way you'll be reminded of one more nail in the evolutionary coffin, namely recapitulation. Again, we got that dash in the middle for no reason, this time without a space. Interesting. And we get 2 quotes at the end again. During development, the fertilized egg progresses over 38 weeks through what is, in fact, a rapid passage through evolutionary history. From a single primordial cell, the conceptus progresses through being something of a protozoan, a fish, a reptile, a bird, a primate, and ultimately a human being. There is a difference of opinion among scientists about the time during a pregnancy when a human being is said to emerge. But there is a general agreement that this does not happen until after the end of the first trimester. This is from Ellie A. Schnauer. Stephen Jay Gould says, recapitulation provided a convenient focus for the pervasive racism of white scientists. They looked at to the activities of their own children for comparison with normal adult behavior in lower races. Now, this is telling us what's going to happen in the next chapter. It's giving us a little taste, so we're getting ready for the next chapter. That's just how Hank does these endings. They're really teasers. And I was just thinking that, you know, I do put a lot of extra white on my face for these videos. You know, just the goth thing or the clown thing, right? So I thought, okay, well then I'll just do the opposite. No, I can't. No. So that's why I started laughing while I was reading this. Not because it's particularly hilarious. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe we'll just do this exact face, but opposite. Probably not. Well, how did you fare with your predictions? I don't even remember my predictions at this point. I don't remember a lot of stuff. The only thing I remember is I want to get the hell out of here. So we're going to do the whole wrap-up thing and just move on because this was terrible. This was really, this is the worst one so far. Hank always outdoes himself. Every chapter is worse than the last. And if you want to enjoy more of these videos, either as live streams that are done for cult members or checking out these videos early, you can join the Lemon Cult. You can do that here on YouTube with the YouTube memberships or on Patreon. Both of those links are in the details section below. And you can just join us on Discord. We do have a separate section that's hidden. It's for the cult members, but most of the Discord is just for everybody to hang out, chat, and all that stuff. So you can get some feedback. You can chat with everybody there. They're a very chill group of people. It's a very easy Discord. Love it. Everybody there is great. And you can also get notifications for when I post these videos. Yeah, that's it. This is so bad. This is bad. This really... I never thought a book would make me want to read Frank and Norm's stuff. Hank is truly something else. With that being said, as always, thanks for listening.
Train up a child in the way they should go, and they shan't depart from it. Spare the rod, spoil the child's what we're told. They want to justify being hit. Children must obey their parents in all things. Honest pleases the Lord. But is that all I can expect from my life? Constant submission till I'm floored. What if this isn't exactly true? Where would that even leave me and you? If religion poisons everything, where is the antidote? Come drink the lemonade with me, erase all that guilt. Why would God create us evil and wrong and punish us from afar? And tell us we're broken to sell us pure, we're worthy as we are. Among his names, why is one of them jealous? What does that even mean? Why require our worship anyway? Why does he need anything? He is the potter and we are the clay. He does what he wills. If that is not, what could we even do? It's his choice to save or kill. Why create this buster system? Where's all the alleged wisdom? If religion poisons everything, where is the antidote? Come drink the lemonade with me, erase all that guilt. Why would God create us evil and wrong and punish us from afar? You tell us we're broken to sell us pure, we're worthy as we are. What if I'm a doubting Thomas? Why refuse to reach out to us? If we are to seek the Lord, why does he hide of his own accord? Why give us brains to reason, but using them is highest